That was the most epic avoiding Babylon intro we've ever had. Taffy, hands down, your best work to date.
Taffy. I mean, is Taffy in the chat?
Taffy's definitely in the chat. He's got to
somewhere.
Be in here. He's definitely in here. They talk a lot about the Groyper curse, but I've seen plenty of people over the years have something to say about Dr. Taylor Marshall, and it never ends well for any of them.
You just ignore and keep, as Vanilla Ice says, did I stop? No, I just roll by. You just keep going.
You've actually always handled people sniping at you very well. Like you've always just ignored it, just keep on pressing, keep doing what you're doing, and just go along with everything. So I respect you for that. I don't have that kind of self-control. I have this innate need to just respond to everything. So how have you been, man? Like we haven't spoken since the new pontiff. And I know
really.
Yeah, I don't think we've
not on camera.
Not on camera, yeah. And I know like my initial reaction when it was all going down, I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening right now? And I thought like the end of I thought it was just going to be way worse. And then after thinking about it a bit, I was like, it's not good for the new pope to come into this hostile environment. And and then I saw you kind of take that position, and it's been a very different mood since Leo's come in, right?
Well, I mean, I got to admit that I was dooming a little bit. I was live chatting, and I heard him announce it in Latin, and there was crowds, and I heard the word Robertus.
Oh boy, you got that!
And I was like, "That's Robert Sarah, baby."
Yeah,
we just won. This is it. Post the dubs. And then a non-black guy walked out. It was another Robertus. It was Robert Prevost. And I was like, oh, I knew who he was. I was like, oh, no. But, honestly, I did kind of tear up a little bit when I saw him dressed traditional. I immediately picked up on that's not the – so and then he did the Hail Mary in Latin. And so I logged off and I just prayed about it that whole day and took it in. And I said, he's 69 years old. We're going to have this guy unless something happens for 20 years.
Yeah.
So let's just pray for him. Let's hope that the charism of the papacy begins to saturate in his soul. And, let's wait and see. We've been 90 days now, or 3 months about. And there's been some good stuff. I'm not thrilled about some of these appointments. I don't think a lot of people are, but Pope Benedict waited 2 years to do some more in Pontificum. I am wait and see and be optimistic and pray for him and give him a chance. That's my position, still is.
Pius IX was elected as a liberal and kind of reigned as a liberal for 2 years from 1846 until the revolutions in 48. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen over 20 years?
Yeah.
Do you think there's any significance to having an American pope during this American and Trump is just this figure he's just this historic figure like we've never seen before, and then you get an American pope seeing everything kind of drum up in Israel the way it is. Like, I don't know, man. Do you ever get feelings of apocalyptic mania watching all these things unfold?
No, I mean, I think I said over and over, I probably said 12 times on my podcast, it's not going to be an American. It's not going to be Burke. Everybody just chill on that. And I was completely wrong. I honestly, this is a little cynical and I don't mean to doom pill or anything here, but I think it does have to do with money. Mm-hmm. I think the Vatican is running on deficit, and the richest segment of the Catholic Church in the world is the United States of America. So I think that does play into it a little bit. Otherwise, there's no reason to elect an American. And you look at the history of, when French popes started being elected, and usually it's been Italians, but it makes me scratch my head a little bit. And that right there, the money element is I think part of it.
And it happened only a few months after the U.S. federal spigot was turned off with U.S. aid.
Yeah, it did. And I think a lot of Americans who have been generous with Peter Pence and diocesan appeals and all that, they've since COVID have tightened their purses and said, no, we're not giving anymore. We're unhappy. I think this goes back to 2002, but especially the McCarrick scandal, 2018, 19, all that, that is also, I think, caused problems. So yeah, there's definitely an element to that of having a American Pope.
What do you think happens with the traditionalist movement at this point? Like there was something about Francis that, as rough as it was for those 12 years, there was something exciting in the traditional movement where people were taking their faith very seriously, and they were like, wait, we have to do something because things just seem so rocky. But it seems like there's a little bit of disunity now, and like people are getting a little lackadaisical. I'm saying that wrong. People always make fun of me. It's lackadaisical, I think. But people seem to, without all the craziness coming out of Rome, I feel like the whole the podcast arena is changing a bit. What do you think is in store for us in traditional circles?
I think the general consensus is what we've just discussed, and that is wait and see, be kind, be patient. There is a group who have already said Pope Leo is not the Pope. This guy is Francis 2.0. We need to resist him. And, but I think it's not at all like it was in the traditional circles under Pope Francis circa 2022.
Yeah.
Like, that's when it was insane, man.
Yeah.
Like you just said the word Francis and people are like off.
Yeah. Yeah. And under Benedict, the traditionalists were never like hostile towards the Pope. They would point out all the issues with Vatican II, and they would talk about all the issues in the Novus Ordo and things like that. But there was always a respect given to Benedict and even John Paul II from even, the guys who were doing this forever, like Michael Matt and all those guys. They would never come right out and be disrespectful to the Pope. It was really Francis that kind of changed the tone of everything.
Yeah, early on when he made the breeding like rabbits comment, when Amoris Laetitia came out and Cardinal Burke and Cardinal Brandmuir and some, preeminent stalwart trad cardinals openly questioned this document. And you saw Cardinal Mueller was pushing back, and he was the prefect of Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. I think that right there opened the floodgates. People were already feeling it. People already had anxiety about it. And I know a lot of people say, oh, it's, Taylor Marshall's fault and these bloggers and these podcasts and all that. But honestly, I think if you go back and look at how the dominoes fell, you really do see some preeminent princes of the church starting to square off with Pope Francis in those years. And I think that in a big way, not to mention Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano putting out his letters, he kept going. I think at that moment, people were willing to start talking out loud about it. And I think that point is missed by a lot of people in the X social media, YouTube, podcast space. They've kind of forgotten how things went down back then.
It was McCarrick. It definitely, the rumbling started with the Amoris Laetitia. Definitely, there was a lot of things starting to brew up, but it was McCarrick that everybody was just like, I've had it. And which is interesting because Vigano, when Francis visits America, Vigano brings him to meet that woman who is now bringing that case to the Supreme Court, right? What's her name?
I forgot
Kim
her name.
Powers.
That's right.
Yeah, so Francis comes to America, and Vigano introduces him to this woman because this woman stood up and said, "I will not hand out a marriage license for a same-sex couple." And Francis kind of like shuns Vigano, and that was beginning of that fractured relationship there.
That's right. I mean, these fractures and these movements were already happening in the hierarchy, because podcasting, I mean, it's not that new, but in the Catholic space, it's new. That was really the first time for people to come on and commentate on it. And then you have people drinking coffee and eating donuts after mass talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, it was only bishops and cardinals who were aware of some of these, you know, rivalries and fights and whatnot. So I think, yeah, it's really the perfect storm. Like when all that cracked and happened is also when all this media stuff, not just your mainstream media, you know, like your New York Times and your CNN, but all of these little micro voices.
It's funny how the podcasting movement has kind of created a more synodal church.
That's actually funny. Well, no, because look, if that had happened 10 years earlier, you'd have only gotten news from National Catholic Register. You'd have had the Fish Wrap out there, National Catholic Reporter. They would have had their version. You'd have gotten 3 or 4 news sources. But because it happened during this technological boom when podcasting starts, it's interesting because we used to have like a common pop culture where we would have water cooler talk when everybody would watch the Seinfeld episode. You'd go and talk about, but it became podcast. So after mass, we'd all be gathered together and talking about the latest Taylor Marshall episode. And can you believe this latest scandal broke? And it really did change the entire conversation in the church, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people want to blame me and others for that. And that's fine. I don't really care, but this is not going away. And I think it's Francis was the first pope in the history of the Catholic Church to walk onto that stage. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, he had a lot of scandalous decisions that happened under his pontificate. So in a way, maybe it was providential, but I think when they elected Pope Leo XIV, they also knew that there's a lot more focus on the papacy, and people are literally listening to what happens every single day. There's a podcast every day where he met with this person, and, you know, Diane Montagna, I've got the document, you know, here it is, click the link for the PDF. And then I'm talking about it, and 3 or 4 other podcasts are talking about that within hours, like 9 hours after it breaks, same day. And then, yeah, you've got people listening to it, talking about it at coffee hour, and it's really viral. I think actually it's kind of interesting. 2 things went together at that time. You had everybody reporting on this, and then you also had a lot of the prominent voices also saying, and by the way, the solution is you should start going to traditional Latin Mass and reading the Baltimore Catechism and praying the Rosary and like just entrench in traditional Catholicism. Like it was the perfect storm for that. And it's not going to go away. I think it's stronger than ever. It's growing, whether or not they're restricting or not. People are rejecting that sort of what Bishop Barron calls beige Catholicism, right?
Just because that's kind of what he presents.
It's a different moment, and I'm very optimistic about where we're going to go here. And that's why I also think it's important that we pause and we give Pope Leo a chance, because Pope Leo knows, and all the cardinals know, and all the bishops know, that if this starts going sideways and there's a sense of betrayal, it's going to be a lot louder than it was under Pope Francis.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that like Don Corleone here, right? But I mean, y'all agree with me, right? Like
100%.
It's not going to be just people whistling. Like this is, you know, and it's twiddling their thumbs. It's going to be explosive.
See,
you said kind of this moment, this calm in the storm, you know, like let's reset the chessboard. You know, what's our opening here? But again, the next 3 years will be a big moment.
See, you said it was the money, and I do think that was not that it's only that, but I do think that's a factor. But I think I think Pope Leo understands optics. He understands American media. And I don't think Francis ever, or the people around him ever expected to get the backlash they got, coming mainly from the American media.
Yeah.
Like the English speaking media is mainly in America. There's a couple of voices in the UK that are good, but it was mainly American English speaking media that was the biggest opposition to everything he was doing. And I think it's interesting because there's not a chance that Pope Leo doesn't know who Dr. Taylor Marshall is. I mean, every cleric who lived under the who was, you know, in authority under the Francis papacy knew who you were. So that has to be a bit of a trip for you, right? That the Pope knows who
not
you
just
are.
me, but a lot of other people as well. Like,
yeah,
I have it on good authority that from 2 different sources that Pope Francis did watch my videos. He was aware. So
yeah.
it's up there. And yeah, I mean, if you're like, how come we're not getting the donations we used to get from the United States of America? And what's the deal with the Latin Mass? And what's the deal with Vigano? And why is Vigano and Donald Trump exchanging public letters? And all this stuff is going on. You're going to start asking questions in your meetings and over tea in Rome. What's going on in America? And so, you know, they had many years to tap into this. And I think they did understand that. I think, you know, Pope Leo was on Twitter. He seems somewhat active. I think he knows what's going on. And that's kind of what I say, like, everyone's giving him the chance. We're praying for him. We're praying rosaries. We're fasting. But we are like watching. Like, it's not like, well, that was over. That chapter's over. This edifice still exists. It's just, I think, you know, being kind and being Catholic and praying for the Holy Father.
Do you think any of the relationships that kind of got ruptured between Catholic media figures? Because under Francis, it became anybody critical of Francis could never speak to those who were not critical of Francis. And like, do you see any healing amongst the siblings in the family of Christ? Right, because that was always hard seeing that, where it was like, oh well, the guilt by association. Oh, you talk to Taylor Marshall, now I can't talk to you because you know. And I'm hoping some of that can heal under Leo.
I think it depends on the Pope and the Church. I think it really depends, because those fractures that happened were all based on what is your reaction to this situation, and then people got into different segmented groups. That didn't exist under Pope Benedict XVI. I was going to traditional Latin Mass under Pope Benedict XVI. I don't remember that. You know, it was very common, like someone's a charismatic Catholic and Novus Ordo and Steubenville and Trad, and you would pray a rosary, and there wasn't this sort of like, what brand are you? That those labels were there, but under Francis, it very much did become, what are you? Even to the point of, are you FSSP? Are you ICK? Are you SSP? Yeah. Like that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, it really got magnified. And so I think it depends on Pope Leo. If we can get back to a consensus under what we have with Pope Benedict XVI, I think we will start seeing that healing. But there's people who pop off and they want to get clicks and they want to get views and they want to get popular. And a great way to do that is to infight and create your own little tribe.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah. The weird part about what we're experiencing right now is that you have the Where Peter Is crowd and, you know, Austin Ivory all claiming Leo for them. And then you have the trads kind of sitting there very just in trepidation, like, oh, we'll see what happens. But that cannot coexist for too much longer. There's going to be things that happen. And I'm pretty sure, I'm thinking the end of the summer, we're hoping that we get some kind of a document on the Latin Mass. But I think that's going to kind of, you don't think so?
I don't think so. I think what we'll see in the fall, probably around October, this is kind of what I heard, we'll start to see different appointments to the Vatican, to the Roman Curia. And we'll see, you know, if the lady continues over the dicastery for religious life. We'll see if Kissy Tucho Fernandez, does he stay over the dicastery for doctrine? Who's going to be placed in the dicastery for sacraments and liturgy? if we start seeing those changes, that I think is going to signal the movement forward. And I think we'll probably maybe see that October, November. We're not going to get a document on the Latin Mass by the end of the summer. I think it would probably be earliest 1 year into his papacy, we would see it. Because Leo, it's just like when Trump took office, like, okay, who are my friends? Everyone's like, oh man, I'm your best friend. I got the inside scoop for you. You want to listen to me? Don't listen to that guy. He's going to betray. Everyone's jockeying for their place. And it really, Trump didn't even figure it out in his first 4 years. He's getting betrayed left and right. So when you come into a powerful position, even if you have big plans, you still need to know the landscape and who the people are and who you can trust. And that takes at least 1 year. And so I don't think he's going to put out any motu proprios or heavy document. If he was going to do it, he would have done it in the first month, like Trump, writing executive orders. He'd be like, glad on the tongue, signed, Summorum Pontificum revised, signed. He would have pumped out like 12 motu proprios and everybody would just be celebrating and awesome. But he didn't do that. That tells me he's going to delay, he's going to figure out. And then if he does do it, I think it'll be at least a year in. So that's when trads tell me like, hey, is he going to bring back, no. And it's not going to be the end of the summer. And I would love to come back and eat a shoe on this. I told you he was going to do it August 30th, and he did it August 30th.
I'm really glad you're saying this because it's tempering expectations a bit. And I think you're 100% right. Especially you see the way Leo's doing everything. He's like, it's been so quiet, like the news scene out of Rome. So I'm kind of glad you're saying that. Now, the other thing is he is expected to put something out, like he's going to put an encyclical or something out. Do you think there's going to be anything on the podcast space? Because he did invite all those e-girls over to Rome for the Jubilee and made them all walk on their. No, I'm kidding. But he did invite all of the what the hell influencers to Rome. Yeah. So it seems like he may be gearing up to make a statement on some of the modern media.
Yeah, that might be a strategy. You have to remember that these are older gentlemen and they're sitting around and they're like, man, the podcast influencer space came at us like a tidal wave. We can't stop it. Maybe we can harness it. And that might be what this influencer meeting in Rome was all about, is let's bring some people in, let's get to know them, and they might even want to figure out how to institutionalize that. Like, who are some people who can be official? And they might, I look at that and I think that's kind of like, your grandparents when they found out about email, it's like you put the stamp, there is no stamp. You just send it, And
then chain letters started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think they fully understand like how decentralized the moment is and the technology is.
Yeah.
So if they are trying to do that, they might very well be trying to do that. I don't know how effective it would be. There's obviously some clear choices of who they would choose.
Yeah, obviously.
Their number one.
Yeah, it's kind of like the synodal way when they would invite certain people to make sure they got the end result they were hoping for. It seems like that they may be carefully choosing who they invite to Rome to make sure the end result looks the way they want.
Yeah. So I think they're aware of it. I think, look, the best thing they could do is without, and they're probably worried about, ticking off all the liberals in Europe, but the best thing they could do and Pope Leo could do is just make very firm Catholic statements that would reassure the base, the people who actually go to Mass, people who are actually putting money in the basket, people who are actually having babies and baptizing their babies, tighten up that base by affirming Catholic teaching. And I really think 60% of the anger and the contradiction would go away if they allowed the traditional Latin Mass.
I do too.
It's a symbol of, it's really a symbol of the restriction and sort of the animosity of Pope Francis. And that's what everybody's still kind of injured with and wounded and bruised. I think if Leo did that, there would just be a big relief, and honestly, like the money would roll in. Not that it's all about that, right? It's not about the money, but they need the money. And, you know, the movement of fidelity, traditionalism is growing still, even after they restricted it.
Yeah.
It's bigger than it was last year, and it's bigger than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny. They always talk about how we're only 1% of the church, but they're very worried about it because they see that is where the growth, even though it's slow growth. I'm not trying to overplay it. It is slow, but it is where you see the vibrant youth attracted to. And it's even the Novus Ordo, more normie crowd. They all want like communion rails, and they want Latin chant brought to their Novus Ordo. Like this whole experiment that they tried putting in, which is why the Detroit situation is so bizarre to me, because man, this guy, he's just like he just seems like an old man trying to like hold on to this revolution from the 60s that just, did you see the pictures of him on that marching with the immigrants and care for the environment? It was just filled. It was an entire church filled with people over 75 years old. And there was one young family, and it was just a depressing picture to see.
Yeah. And if you remember, like Pope Leo 69, it's really that people in their 60s and up who are the last group of people who thought Vatican II was so cool and so great. And I remember when the priest used to pray with his back towards us, that rhetoric, you don't hear anyone under that age saying that. Mm-hmm. And we have to realize that in 20 years, that's the younger group, right? Pope Francis, he's the age group that was like really in the thick of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All in. Leo's on the very, very, he's maybe, right on the border of it. In 20 years, they're not going to be in charge.
Yeah.
And what's it going to look like? I think a lot of dioceses are going to go under. I think you're going to see a lot of parishes that are like the ones you were just talking about, where it's all about environment and social justice and immigration. Those are not going to endure. They're not going to be around. And I think we might see a little bit of a shrinkage and a restriction. But if you look for the vocations and you look for the faith and the love and the growth and the families, and I would even say the charity and the caring for the poor and the homeless, it really is in traditional communities.
Yeah, for sure.
We might be 1% now, but when you look at what's the number? I always hear different numbers now. Like what percent of Catholics in America go to Mass? Like 17%?
Yeah, I think that's the latest figure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so when you consider that we're 1%, but we're 1% of that 17%, we're now 1 in 17.
Yeah.
So when a bishop goes to a diocesan appeal dinner to raise money, that means 1 in 17 people that he's shaking hands with might go to the TLM.
That's like 6 or 7%.
Pretty sizable. Those are active Catholics.
Yeah. And I think there's a very sizable portion who may go to the Novus Ordo but want a more traditional form of it, like the crazy rock band masses. I think the Life Teen stuff is played out. I think everybody is kind of just done with all of that.